Merry Christmas, written by USA Today bestselling author Lexy Timms, copyright 2023 by Lexy Timms, narrated by Kathleen Starr Hall. Chapter 8, December 8th. Coulson began to respond to Blair, but a chime from the grandfather clock stopped him. He didn't need to count the chimes to know that it was midnight. They'd spent hours together, yet it felt like the time flew by. He enjoyed her company that much. Unfortunately, Blair was now glaring at him, her mouth thinning in disapproval. "What are you looking at me like that for?" he demanded. "I didn't start the tradition." "It says that Clementine Bennett is the heiress who helped come up with it," Blair said. "I'm assuming that this Clementine is a relative of yours?" "Well, yeah. I'm one of her descendants." He winced, realizing that he needed to explain the rest. "Also, the housemaid mentioned in the article was my great-grandmother Opal's mom." "What?" He tried again before she fully lost it. "I'm related to Clementine Bennett and Oksana Stevens. Opal, my great-grandmother, was Oksana the housemaid's daughter. Opal eventually married Clementine's son." Blair almost went cross-eyed. "Both of the women mentioned in the article are your relatives? The heiress and the housemaid?" "Yep. They're both my great-great-grandmothers," he said. "They brought the mistletoe tradition to the town." She tapped her foot on the floor in frustration. "Did you know about this?" "Did I know that my family actually had Christmas traditions after all? No, I didn't." He had to fight the urge to laugh at the irony. Hours ago, he'd lamented not having Christmas traditions like other people, and now he'd just found out that his own family had kicked off the town's biggest holiday tradition. The news was also clearly annoying Blair, and, well, he found it sort of amusing that she took harmless fun so seriously. "The article says that they came up with the tradition to drum up business and encourage tourism to the area. Clementine wanted to make the town more festive, and Oksana suggested mistletoe because her husband was a gardener who knew a lot about plants. Both of them thought they could add to the festivities by encouraging people to come to the town for a kiss," Blair said. "Clementine even had the town renamed to Mislin Bush for that purpose. It was some holiday gimmick that started right here at the mansion. There was a ball and everything. And with it being Christmas, the rich and the working class got to rub elbows together for the one time of the year. People came from miles around to kiss random strangers at the ball." He ran a hand through his hair and chanced a smile. "Interesting how things start, huh?" "You're enjoying this," she bit out. "You have to admit, Blair, it's kind of funny," he said, "especially when you consider the irony of anyone in my family caring that much about Christmas. You'd find it funny if you knew my father. The man is Scrooge personified, so for his ancestors to have brought a Christmas tradition to the town we founded is pretty entertaining." "I can't believe you're joking about this," Blair said sharply. "What's the big deal?" "Big deal? You don't think it's weird that there was a ball for people to kiss each other? I know the mistletoe tradition exists in a lot of places, but a chaperoned ball? They were literally being gawked at by strangers. A photographer was there," she said. "Considering that it was the early 20th century, the ball was probably about as exciting as a church picnic," he said with a chuckle. "They serve non-alcoholic cider, for crying out loud." Blair crossed her arms. "It's still weird." "A town quirk is bound to be weird." He gave her a sidelong glance, noticing the way she was worrying her lower lip with her teeth. "Why is this getting to you, anyway?" "Because everything is their fault," she said in frustration. "Everything? I feel like I'm missing an important detail here." He reached out to place a calming hand on her arm, the warmth of her silky skin stirring him. "You really didn't know about this piece of the town's history? History is kind of your forte, isn't it?" "I wasn't aware of the whole story," she said, sighing. "I knew there had been a tourism push related to the mistletoe, but that was the extent of it. I never learned the details. Honestly, I never cared to learn the details because it's all too ridiculous to engage with." "Okay, so there was a gap in your knowledge about the town," he said. "Is that what's troubling you?" Blair went quiet for several long moments, as if she was taking the time to slowly gather her thoughts. Finally, she said, What's bothering me is that my family has used this tradition against me for a really long time. Used it against you? Coulson turned to really look at her. How so? She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, pulling her arm from him to anxiously twine a lock of hair around her finger. My family can be a bit pushy about my love life. Man, I know that story, he said. No, you don't get it. They're constantly showing me how disappointed they are that I don't have a serious boyfriend or a husband, she said. I mean, you talked to my dad on the phone, right? Coulson thought back to the brief conversation he'd had with the older man on the phone the Monday morning he'd called Blair. Yeah, pretty friendly guy. Friendly with a propensity to overshare, she huffed out. He did mention that his only daughter was single, Coulson said, chuckling. Of course he did, because he does that all the time, she said. Dad is always trying to pawn me off on guys. He's always dropping hints or just flat out pushing men towards me, and my brothers enable him. They're all trying to get you hitched, huh? Yes, and they get worse around the holidays because of the stupid mistletoe, she said. They've been doing this since I was in high school. It was funny at first, but now it's just exhausting. A reminder that no matter what I do, it's not good enough. What about your store? That's a success. A success? Blair scoffed. It barely makes a profit most months, which I'm sure you've guessed. After all, what was it you said? Oh, right. The place is tiny and most small businesses fail. Is it really worth all that hard work? Now he just felt like a complete jerk. He'd clearly caused more hurt than he realized, and guilt twisted through his gut. Blair, when I said that stuff, it was only meant to encourage. I was trying to help. Help? You want to help by playing backseat driver to my life the way everyone else does? Now all of her hurt and annoyance with him was beginning to make sense. If her whole family was breathing down her neck, then it probably felt like more of the same if anyone said something that made her feel like she wasn't doing enough, which was the opposite of what he'd been trying to do. Coulson hadn't tried making suggestions because he thought she was inadequate or doing her job wrong. He'd done it because he saw all of her potential. She had shown him how important it was for business to care about the community around it. Though he didn't know nearly as much about antiques as Blair or his great-grandmother, he was starting to appreciate what Blair was doing with her shop. After all, she'd helped his great-grandmother pick out the right Christmas gift for him years ago. Truly, the vintage pocket watch had been the perfect choice. In addition to being a timepiece he could appreciate for its craftsmanship, the ornate watch had been a reminder to slow down. While the message hadn't made him any less of a workaholic, he'd been moved that Opal had put so much effort into it, and with Blair's help. Almost like they were the two people who knew him best, which was crazy because he'd only just met Blair. No, he said finally. Nobody should tell you how to live your life. Yeah, well, your family has been telling us how to live our lives for like 100 years now. Blair shook her head as she suddenly reached for her bag. I should go. What? It's past midnight, she said, getting up to shoulder her bag. I've overstayed my welcome. It's late. Why don't you let me drive you? Better yet, why don't you just crash here for the night? No, thank you. She sounded weary now, as if the lateness of the hour was finally starting to set in for her. I only had one drink, and that was hours ago. I'll manage. He got up. Blair, wait. She swept past him, heading for the living room exit. I can handle myself. I'm really going to have to insist, he said firmly, a protective instinct seizing him. Blair stopped to gaze at him. It was hard to decipher the emotion that flickered behind her eyes. Was that anger? Sadness? Regret? Whatever it was, he saw the turmoil storming through her was so much like his own. They were both being crushed by family obligation, and for the first time in his life, he truly understood that it wasn't just wealthy parents who demanded so much from their children. That's just the problem, Coulson, she said at last. People like you and your family, you're always insisting. With that, she marched off, the sound of her footsteps getting fainter and fainter until he heard the front door open, a car engine start, and then silence. What the hell was wrong with her? Could she blame it on PMS? Between her outburst at Colson's house and the period app notifications that had been bombarding her phone the past couple of days, it probably was PMS. At least she hoped it was, because Blair had made a complete fool of herself last night. She turned over in her bed and reached for the cursed phone on her nightstand. The alarm was supposed to go off in the next 20 minutes, but she was already awake. She'd kept waking up during the night, replaying her argument with Colson over and over before drifting off to fitful sleep. Last night had not ended on a high note, though the evening had started off so well. She'd enjoyed talking to Colson so much that she'd been surprised at how quickly the time had flown by, only for everything to be ruined when she discovered that his family had come up with the town's worst tradition. Honestly, she had been so caught off guard that she hadn't been able to handle all the emotions she'd been feeling. A normal person would have thought it was sweet, a cute little anecdote about small-town history. Unfortunately, Blair had been molded by her hometown's odd customs and a family who refused to butt out of her life. Discovering that Colson's family was responsible for her annual holiday misery had just pushed her over the edge, and she'd taken it out on him. Her phone chimed, and she swiped the screen to look at the latest notification. Another chirpy reminder from the app. Period. Incoming. Ugh. Silently cursing herself, she put the phone back down, then grabbed a pillow to shove it over her face and groaned as loudly as possible. Yeah, she had acted like a total idiot last night. Colson was probably done with her. Would he get in touch with her to call her out on her unprofessional behavior? Should she call him to smooth things over? After all, he was a potential client, although last night hadn't felt professional at all. It hadn't even felt friendly. More like a first date than anything else. Until, of course, her meltdown. If she did settle on calling him, she'd have to be honest, explain that her emotions had gotten the best of her. She couldn't make excuses or blame it on the wine, and she definitely couldn't blame it on PMS. Even if she had the nerve to do that, it was TMI anyway. Groaning again, she tossed the pillow and decided to get up. There was no point in staying in bed for the next 20 minutes. She'd only be consumed by her thoughts anyway. Blair dragged herself out of bed. When she went to the bathroom, she discovered pretty quickly that her period really had started sometime during the night when she'd been tossing and turning. Great. Best to brace herself for a bad day. She'd already ruined things with Colson anyway. When she was done showering, Blair got dressed, then went to her tiny kitchen to make herself a cup of coffee. She filled her snowman mug, adding a splash of cream. Naturally, the snowman on her mug looked ridiculously happy. If only she could get back some of that holiday cheer, especially since she always liked to greet store customers with a smile. Sighing, she sat down at the kitchen table and sipped her coffee. Every year she went through this, the roller coaster of the holidays. There would be annoying mistletoe everywhere. Her family would badger her about being single for yet another year, and she'd feel like she wasn't enough. So she'd throw herself into Christmas traditions with gusto to distract from how bad her family made her feel. They meant well. She knew that. Plus, deep down, she'd love to have a boyfriend, real companionship, someone to lean on, and not just someone dependable. Blair wanted a partner who gave her butterflies, a man who made her feel passion and yearning, a man who made her feel the way Colson made her feel. She almost dropped the mug at that thought. No, you don't want Colson. You want someone like Colson. There, that was better. And Blair had to be careful. She couldn't get so fanciful that she let her emotions get the best of her. These feelings she got around Colson would subside. They'd go away when he left town. Then everything would go back to the way it was. She couldn't seem to remember what life was like before he showed up. Being around him just seemed to heighten her emotions. Everything felt like so much more, felt bigger than her ordinary life. Significant, as if things had changed and they would never be the same again. There she was, getting carried away. Blair was usually so much more sensible than this. But then, it had been a while since she'd met anyone who made her feel things so intensely. Yeah, she was going to have to apologize to Colson, at the very least for her own peace of mind. Otherwise, she'd think about him endlessly, and that was no way to get any work done during her store's busiest season. Resigned to her decision, she steeled herself for what she had to do next. Blair retrieved her phone from her handbag and dialed Coulson. No answer. Then a voicemail prompt. Feeling relief and disappointment all at the same time, she hung up. If he was ignoring her, she didn't blame him. She paused to draft a text, giving a brief apology and a request for him to get in touch. When she sent it, her heart clenched. Maybe she had screwed this up so badly that he'd refused to return her call. Her thoughts plagued her on her drive to the store, and then all through her workday. By the time work ended, Blair still hadn't received a call or text from Coulson. She'd put the ball in his court, and he obviously didn't want to hear from her. Best to take the hint and let him be. Blair's gloom turned to full-blown sadness as she locked up the store for the day, weight pressed down on her shoulders on her way to her car. She got behind the wheel and started driving aimlessly. A couple of her friends were supposed to be coming over for a night of watching sappy Christmas movies, but she was so out of sorts. For one thing, she still felt drained after a lack of sleep. For another, she hadn't told any of her friends about Coulson. Her father was the only person who even knew about him, and she'd like to keep it that way. While her friends didn't pressure Blair about her love life the way her family did, she was still too raw from the argument. Besides, how would she even explain feeling sad over a man she'd barely known for a week? Her friends would think she had lost it, and maybe she had. That seemed to be the best explanation for all of this. Before she wound up driving in circles, Blair decided to head to the shopping center. A short stop to get snacks and stock up on ground ginger for gingerbread cookies was in order. Oh, who was she kidding? She had a cabinet full of snacks, but she needed a distraction before going home. Anything to get her out of this funk. She was at the supermarket checkout when her cell phone rang. Her heart jumped. It was Coulson. "Hey," she said, answering on the second ring. "I got your message," he said, his low tone making her insides flutter. "What's all this about apologizing?" Blair chewed her lower lip, guilt flooding her as the cashier logged her items. "I stormed out of your house yesterday." "Oh, right. Completely forgot about that," he said. "You did not," she said, laughing softly. "I lost it. Lashed out at you." "Yeah, no, that's not ringing any bells," he said. She couldn't tell if he was messing with her or just trying to let her down easy. Either way, she wanted to apologize again. "I think this whole mistletoe thing is more of a sore spot than even I realized, and instead of handling it like an adult, I took it out on you." "You also took it out on my poor great-great-great-grandmothers," he said, laughing. I think your ancestors earned a little bit of my annoyance on that front. Changing the town's name was a bit much," she said, holding up her phone against her ear with her shoulder while she dug her wallet out of her handbag. "It's the rest of your family that I shouldn't have dragged into it." "Fair enough, though I have to admit, I sort of get it. My family can be a lot. Even I find them frustrating at times," he admitted. "Yeah, I hear that," she said, handing over her debit card. "My family's similar." "I'm sure they're delightful, Blair," he said softly. "Same as you." Her face heated at the compliment. This was not how she'd expected the conversation to go. Blair had been convinced that he would have had to remind her to be a professional at the very least. "Well, I appreciate you calling back." "No problem," he said smoothly. "Apology accepted." She exhaled a sigh of relief, all the tension she'd been walking around with all day starting to melt away. The cashier handed her back her card and she returned it to her purse. "Thanks. That means a lot." "Hey, I can be kind of a dick, so I can't hold a minor disagreement against you, right?" "Right. Yes, exactly." She shoved her handbag into her shopping bag, gathered her things, and made her way to the supermarket exit. "Blair, this is the point of the conversation where you tell me how wrong I am. Here's where you tell me, actually, no, Coulson, you are not a dick. In fact, you're extremely charming," he said. "A joy to be around." "Ha! You think very highly of yourself," she teased, walking through the automatic doors. "Somebody has to," he grumbled. "Well, I did have a wonderful time at dinner last night," she said. "At least until I stormed off like a loon." Coulson laughed again. "You know, I had fun too." "Even when I flounced off?" "Honestly, I was more concerned than anything," he said.
Promise me something?
Sure, of course, anything.
If you have to rush off again, let me know when you get home safe, he said, his voice softening. I was pretty worried about you.
I promise, she said, meaning it.
Good, because I kept checking my phone for messages from you last night, just in case, he said. But of course, I was in a meeting when you called this morning, so I missed it. Sorry about that.
Work meetings?
Yeah, all damn day. My father likes working everybody to death this time of year, almost like he wants to punish the staff for daring to have a holiday. She could hear the change in his tone. There was the barest hint of frustration in his words, as if his mood had darkened from just talking about his father and work-related stress.
I'm sorry, that sucks, she said, walking up to her car in the parking lot.
Don't worry about it. Work's done for the day.
She heard music in the background from his end of the call. Wait, what's that? Are you listening to Christmas carols?
Coulson chuckled. I'm in the hardware store. They're playing carols over the loudspeaker.
Her heart jumped again as she shoved her bag into the car. The hardware store.
Yeah, I came back here to buy some Christmas decorations, he explained. I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but I got to thinking about what you said. I don't have to decorate the entire mansion. One room couldn't hurt.
You're actually doing it, she said, her heart swelling. You deserve a nice Christmas, one where you get to decide all the traditions that make you happy.
Well, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, he repeated. I've got a bunch of decorations and zero experience putting this stuff up. Honestly, I could use some of your expert advice.
Expert advice? She couldn't help laughing. You think I'm an expert on Christmas?
Out of the two of us? Yeah, pretty sure you are.
Her stomach wobbled when he said us. Well, after everything, helping you decorate is the least I can do.
Really? He said.
She could actually hear the hope in that single word, and when she was suddenly flooded with so many emotions, her heart melted a little. Of course she would help him decorate. Not only did she want to make things up to him, but she also wanted to show him just how meaningful it could be. He'd never had the chance to actually celebrate the holiday. She couldn't imagine having servants do everything. Couldn't imagine now having any Christmas traditions to call her own. That was what made the stress of the holidays worth it in the end. Traditions that could be shared with people she cared about. That sense of belonging when she shared in familiar rituals. It would mean a lot to teach somebody who was unfamiliar with it. Share that magic with someone. Yes, really, she said. I could come over tomorrow.
Oh, man, that would be a big help, he said, sounding relieved. I've got a cart full of stuff that I don't know what to do with.
She heard the clang of a moving shopping cart in the background. Then she looked over her shoulder at the hardware store across the shopping center. There he was. Coulson was pushing a cart out of the store. He towered over all the people around him, so he was impossible to miss. Hi, Coulson, she waved. Blair noted the shock on his face. His eyes were so green she could see the change in emotion even from this distance. She heard him laugh.
What are you doing here? He asked.
Just running an errand, she told him. Guess great minds think alike.
Yeah, definitely.
See you tomorrow? After work. She felt giddy at the prospect of getting to see him so soon. It was probably a mistake to get so excited about seeing someone she barely knew, but just this once, she'd let herself make the mistake.
Tomorrow,